got to be a player they can rely on in big situations.
And Gerhard Mathangani
has the trust of his team. Sounds like the makeup of his team is in a really good space, and I believe that's because of the culture he's curated down there.
For WKXX Live, these guys have you covered from preps to pros and everything in between. Now, let's go inside the Fox Sports 102.9 studio with Chase and Gerhard for WKXX Live.
Good Thursday afternoon. Welcome in. It is WKXX Live on Fox Sports 102.9. Chase Robinson, Gerhard Mathangani here with you for the next 2 hours. Sit back and enjoy because we've got a great show lined up for you today. You can be a part of the show by giving us a call, 256-413-1029. That is 256-413-1029. That'll get you in to join us today. Whatever's on your mind, we will talk about it. And we're going to be all over the place today. We'll talk some baseball, college football. We'll get into maybe the Thursday night game tonight. Great lineup of guests as Chris Marler from Saturday Down South joins us at 2:30 to talk college football. At 3 o'clock, Brad Law of the Auburn Sports Network will join us. We'll have Wilson Alexander. He's an LSU beat writer for The Advocate down in Baton Rouge. Their newspaper there, and so we'll get Wilson's thought on the LSU Tigers, and Elliot Galt will join us on our weekly Weiss Lake Fishing Report. So all that coming your way over the next couple of hours. And Gerhard, a historic night last night in the World Series. The Astros with their combined no-hitter and a 5-0 win over the Phillies.
Yeah, talk about the swing of emotion in this World Series. You have a 5-home run game. Then 24 hours later, you have a no-hitter.
Yeah.
That's just the second one in history and the first combined no-hitter, the first no-hitter since 1956 and the second overall. It just shows you the kind of the swing and emotions of this series. And for the Astros to get that in a pivotal spot was obviously sensational. And then to be able to do so in a combined style was really, really awesome.
Yeah, and we talked about this yesterday. The fact that this has been a really entertaining World Series, much more entertaining than I thought it would be. But I feel like no team has kind of put themselves out front. No team has really gotten hot. Phillies were the hot team coming in to the series, but I don't feel like either team has just kind of gotten hot. Now we'll see if the Astros can use what they did last night and do that. But they've been pretty balanced.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where I think that if you take each game in a vacuum, you're starting to see kind of where these teams are. But the thing is that I think both teams have shown, hey, over the course of the last, I'd say about 3 weeks of baseball, they can find that streak. The Astros have found it most certainly in different spots, as has the Phillies. But I think you're right. In this series, it feels like nobody has been able to gain full control just of a situation game to game, moment to moment. So we're kind of stuck in this little limbo here. We're finding out what team, the old saying in basketball is that the series doesn't start until a road team wins. I think in baseball is a little bit different because you go 2-3-2. However, in this series, you have game one, or you have one of the games won by Philadelphia in Houston, and now one of the games in Philadelphia or in Houston won by Philadelphia as well. So we've seen both sides of this thing. So I've been entertained by it in a ways that I didn't think so. However, before the series, I think you and I both saw or thought, Astros in 6 felt about right. Well, this is playing out to where that could be a possibility.
Yeah, it is. And again, game 5 tonight, Astros and the Phillies. The Astros need Justin Verlander to show up and show out tonight in this game. He's had an interesting postseason record, and but they're gonna need him to pitch well tonight.
Yeah, they certainly will. I think that whenever you ask these guys that have been here before, these guys that have been at these high levels of baseball, they've pitched in plenty of baseball games with huge stakes involved. You want those guys on the mound, and yesterday to have Christian Javier on the mound and others to be able to get that combined no hitter, it shows kind of what some of your aces could do, some of the guys that you really lean on in these situations. But then to get it from your superstars, I think Syndergaard is still available, if not starting today. And then obviously with Verlander, you just have these guys that you want to lean on in this spot, guys that have done it for a long time over the course of the regular season and in the postseason.
Yeah, and so fun series continues. We'll see if the Astros can pull it out, or if the Phillies can get it done. Again, this Phillies team kind of reminding you of the Braves last year,
Yeah.
the team that nobody thought would be there, and they're able to hold their own. I thought a lot of folks last year thought, I don't know if this Braves team can get the wins when they need to in the World Series. The Phillies are getting those wins they need to right now.
Yeah, they're doing things that teams hadn't done. And you saw, like you mentioned, you saw this run last year in Atlanta. You saw how the Atlanta team really found their stride midway through the postseason. They carried it all the way through midway through the regular season, and they carried it through the postseason. And you're seeing a lot of the same situations, kind of play out here in this series. A really young team, energetic, but then now it's how can you bounce back? And it's one of those situations where I think we won't get our answers until a little bit later on. I think this game is pivotal because now it's tied. It kind of goes back to where it was in game one, where nobody's got the advantage. You're not playing against your own head about, hey, we need to come back. People, might ask, hey, were the Phillies a little relaxed after, destroying the Astros in Game 5? Maybe. Who's to say that they weren't? But I think that you do have a situation playing out now where, hey, if you are a Phillies fan, you understand, hey, we got to go at least to Houston for at least one more. And I think that's kind of the thing that I think adds a little bit more pressure to them going into this matchup. Maybe so than it would have had they won and then maybe, lost the game 6. So it's just, to me, it's pressure filled, but in the kind of the best way, and teams in ways that I think both teams have responded to throughout the course of the regular season. Yeah.
Good points there is, you also have Dusty Baker, who's trying to get his first World Series, and he's kind of the guy that's turned into, people want to see him win a World Series. Mm-hmm. He's been in the game a long time, and I think, barring what people think about the Astros, I think people want Dusty Baker to win, even if they don't want the organization holding that trophy up.
Yeah, I think every time that the Astros celebrate something, people begrudgingly say, okay, they're good, but it's always they're good, but. And I think with Dusty Baker, he kind of alleviates that but part of it. He alleviates that pause. Oh, I really don't want to root for this team because of this situation. So I think a lot of people, especially a lot of Braves fans who either remember him playing or just heard stories about him playing back in the day, really like him, really want him to win. Despite the fact that, he's a Braves guy, and, the other side, you have the Phillies. And as you mentioned, all the backstory with the Astros.
Yeah. And, we had a chance to hear from both managers, Dusty Baker, of course, with the Astros, Rob Thompson from the Phillies, had a chance to hear from Dusty Baker on kind of what he's seeing so far.
Yeah, one of the major things for Dusty Baker is he's now been a part of a couple of World Series no hitters. He was on the losing side of one, or just a no hitter in general in the postseason with Roy Halladay and others at that same field actually. And he talked a little bit about that. He also talked a little bit about just the emotional swings of the World Series, and at the same time, his guys being able to come in and come through in the clutch.
He was electric, and he threw the ball up, down, and that shows you that the best pitch in baseball is still a well-located fastball. And he was calm and cool, and Christian Vasquez called a great game for him. And I think that's the first time I've seen two guys with the same first name as a battery. Nola was dealing on the other side too, until we broke loose, with some consecutive hits, which have been eluding us. We hadn't scored in 14 innings or something like that, 15 innings, whatever it was. So, combined no hitters, that's hard to do because usually somebody's going to give it up, during that no hitter. And so, all our guys were poised and ready and strong, and that's one reason why I didn't use some of those guys in that game to try to salvage that game last night, because I wanted them to be fresh for today, and they'll be fresh, relatively fresh tomorrow.
You know, you kind of have to use pitching differently, as Dusty Baker was talking about him, the way he was using his pitchers. You know, you have to really rethink how you want to work things in the World Series, kind of the way things are laid out.
Yeah, it's certainly a big strategy game, and he even talked about it. He admitted to reporters, you know, he's got to think, well, if this series does go 7 games, does he need to rely on Christian Javier again a little bit later on? And at first he was like, I don't want to think about it. And then he kind of joked and laughed, and he said, you know what, I have thought about it. I thought about it when he was out there that, hey, if this does go 7, you have to think about it a little differently. So you have to move your chess pieces way differently in this side of baseball than you probably would in a different, not even a different series, but also, you know, in a different season or in the regular season or in the postseason. Deep in the postseason, you got to use it a little bit differently than you do here in the World Series.
Yeah, we also heard from Phillies manager Rob Thompson.
Yeah, he talked about their starting pitcher and Christian Javier, who was marvelous for them, and then also, you know, some of the things that his team are relying on after being no hit earlier.
He's got that riding fastball, and I think the biggest thing for him was that he was landing his slider. You know, he's throwing it for strikes for the most part and just kind of keeping guys off balance.
You've spoken about the resiliency of your club all year. What type of resiliency does it take to come back the next day after being no hit in the World Series? That doesn't happen often.
No, it doesn't. I think it's the 3rd time in history, right? Or 2nd time in history. But anyway, you know, we were no hit earlier in the year in New York against the Mets, and we came back the next day and won. So these guys, they got a short memory, and they're going to go home tonight. They're going to go to bed and come back in here tomorrow and prep and compete like they always do.
Game 5 of the World Series tonight there in Philadelphia. We'll take a break here. We'll come back, talk some college football, and much more as we roll on this afternoon. Stick around. It is WKXX Live. Chase and Gerhard here with you on this Thursday. Chris Marler, Saturday Down South, will join us at 2:30. Talk college football with us. But Bill Connolly comes out each week, ESPN.com, with he ranks the unbeatens.
Yeah.
And we'll have less on the list next week. But there are 6 this week, and 6 teams left unbeaten in college football. And Bill Connolly, numbers guy, kind of goes into some of these numbers and analytics as he ranks these.
Yeah, he's obviously takes a lot of insight into the overall rankings, and they use like SP Plus, and they also use the FPI rankings. A lot of these are just metrics that base on efficiencies, whether it's offensive efficiency, defensive efficiency. The only thing it doesn't take into effect is like the injuries and crowd and the situation and momentum. It's basically just straight black and white, much more than it is settling some of the nuances like if Bama gets some bad calls against Tennessee, and Tennessee's undefeated and Bama's not. It's one of those situations. So, I kind of like the way I think a lot of people do these unranking the unbeatens, but I really like his way because it factors in a nuanced sense, but you have to put it in its proper perspective.
Yeah, and so what does Bill Connolly's list look like this week?
All right, so just like last week, TCU is the last of the unbeatens. They come in at number 6 this week. Meanwhile, coming in, and I'll also give you the FPI and SP Plus ranking. SP Plus, they rank 10th in the nation, and FPI, they rank 14th in the country. Meanwhile, at number 5, the Clemson Tigers. SP Plus has them ranked 11th in the nation. Kind of surprising to see where SP Plus has them. FPI has them 7th. The College Football Playoff Committee has them 4th. So just keep in mind, you're ranking these based on numerous things. Now you're ranking these based on the metrics, both SPA Plus and FBI, and then kind of seeing where they are in the College Football Playoff Committee rankings. Moving on to the number 4 team is the Michigan Wolverines. They're 4 both in the SP Plus and the FPI rankings. Meanwhile, coming in at number 3 is the Tennessee Volunteers. They rank 5th in both SP Plus and FPI. Meanwhile, the Georgia Bulldogs come in at number 2. They rank number 2 in SP Plus and number 3 in the FPI rankings. And Ohio State obviously coming in at number 1 according to SP Plus and the FPI. They're both number 1 there. They're number 1 according to Bill Connolly, and they're number 2 according to the College Football Playoff Committee.
All right. So that is Bill Connolly's rankings. But let's see how we rank them here. And so we'll go 6 down. Who do you have at 6?
Okay, actually at number 6, I have Clemson.
Okay.
I think I'm going to do this kind of the way the committee does it. I don't, of all the unbeaten teams, I like their strength of schedule the least. They haven't looked as impressive to me as the other 5 teams that are unbeaten.
Yeah.
I like TCU at number 5. I think that, the gauntlet they had to run through there, and people roll their eyes at the gauntlet, especially with the Big 12, because, a lot of people don't see that team, those teams in conference playing a lot of defense.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you got to score, and TCU has been able to do that. At number 4, I like the Michigan Wolverines. I think that, I really liked what they did against, inferior Michigan State, and then really beat up on Michigan State last week. I think that Ohio State is probably a little bit better than Michigan, but I got Michigan there at number 4. Meanwhile, at number 3, I do have the Ohio State Buckeyes there at number 3. It was very close between Ohio State and Georgia, but to me, when I rank those 2 teams, to me, Georgia has the best win, even though Ohio State has the most complete body of work. I just can't trust what I've seen from Ohio State because I can't measure it against anything.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll be able to measure it against anything until the end of the season against Michigan.
Right.
So that's the reason why I'll slide Ohio State 3rd, even though to me they look the most complete. If that makes any sense, you have to kind of compartmentalize those 2 things. I got Georgia at number 2, and then I like Tennessee at number 1 based on what I've seen so far. I'm not saying that I'm picking Tennessee to win this weekend. I'm just saying what I've seen so far through 8 games. That's how I'd rank it.
We have similar rankings here. I have TCU 6, Clemson 5, Michigan 4. So me and Bill Connolly think alike in that. I've got Georgia at 3.
Okay, yeah.
I think we'll find out a lot about them on Saturday, obviously, playing Tennessee. Got Ohio State 2 and Tennessee 1.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those, like, I think that it's hard to argue with Tennessee at number one based on who they've beaten, and how they've looked while doing it. What I like about ranking the unbeatens, it really shows you the crevasse of just because you have a 0 in the loss column doesn't mean all these teams are built the same. There's a school of thought that, if you're undefeated, you should be X higher than these 1-loss teams in the polls. I like the nuances because then you can nuance 0-loss teams against 1-loss teams. But you can also nuance 0-loss teams against other 0-loss teams, and you can see the crevasse between where Tennessee is and where Clemson is.
Yeah, that's a good point there. And but Tennessee rolling into Athens this Saturday, and we'll find out a lot about both of these teams. We'll find out how Tennessee responds in a tough environment, I think, for sure, coming up this week. We've talked a lot about the Auburn coaching search. And obviously this is a search that's not going to end in the next couple of days. It's going to go on as the season comes to a close. I think we'll have a better picture. I read a lot. I read a lot of message boards. The things some people are saying are just mind blowing.
You gotta love the coaching carousel, man. Like the carousel is, it'll let you think that the ghost of Vince Lombardi will come back and coach some of these teams.
Yes, and but we want to grade the potential Auburn hires. So we're gonna put a 1 to 10 scale. 10 being that is a perfect fit for Auburn. 1 being that is awful. That is terrible and should not happen.
Yeah.
So we'll start with kind of the 3 top targets, as they're saying, as being reported. So 10 being a perfect fit, 1 being awful, terrible. What would you rate Lane Kiffin to Auburn?
Lane Kiffin to Auburn will be a 10.
Yeah.
It would be a perfect fit in so many different ways. Where Auburn is deficient right now is the Jimmies and Joes. It's the guys that are making the plays in the field. He can do that. Transfer portal king. He can do that in a heartbeat. And at the same time, creative genius. And at the same time, he'll be able to coach right in state against Nick Saban, which, obviously that would be, just a different, I think, tickle factor for him, himself personally, in his amazing troll game. So yeah, he's a perfect 10.
He is. Yeah. There's no way around that. He's a 10. We'll see if they can land him. Deion Sanders, what would you rate him?
I'm going to rate him at 8. I think that he is great for what I just talked about earlier, being able to get some new, fresh bodies in there, be able to reinvigorate the program as far as the recruiting aspect goes. But because there's such a huge question mark as far as being able to coach at this level, scheme-wise, the unknown drops it down just a hair. Not a lot, but just a hair. So I'll give it an 8.
I've got him as a 7,
Okay.
But it could be higher. I'm just and like I talked about yesterday, recruiting, he'll be fine. Is he in a position where he can coach? And I know he had a long playing career. He's done it all, but can he coach a team in the SEC in a big situation? That's where I worry about Deion Sanders.
Yeah.
Where would you rate Hugh Freeze?
I'll go just above Deion, but below Lane Kiffin. I'm going to go right at a 9.2. I think that he is very, very solid. Yes, and we're going to use decimals here. I give 9.2 because I believe that obviously his track record in the SEC, he's obviously done really, really well as far as getting talent. He got a lot of talent to Ole Miss. Talk about it for what it's worth. So he knows the lay of the land, and he's done it before. Not above Lane, but right above Deion Sanders.
I've got Hugh at a 9 too. Well, a 9 also. You have him at a 9 too. I have him 9 also. And I think this is a realistic coach for Auburn.
Yeah.
We've seen what he's done at Liberty. He's taken Liberty to where they're having high draft picks, like we've talked about, and they're playing great offensively. He recruited well at Ole Miss.
Yep.
He had some help there, but we'll see if he can recruit at Auburn if he gets the opportunity. But I think Hugh Freeze is very realistic opportunity there for the Auburn Tigers. I wanted to run through the rest, but we got to jump to a break because we have a guest coming up. We might continue this a little bit later on, but Chris Marler will join us from Saturday Down South of the Uncensored College Football Podcast next to talk college football on WKXX Live. We continue on this Thursday afternoon. It is Chase and Gerhard with you this afternoon. Chase Robinson, Gerhard, Mathangani, as we are talking college football, and we're going to continue that conversation now. We welcome on Chris Marler with Saturday Down South, also with the College Football Uncensored podcast. Chris, appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, of course, man, of course. Anytime I can get back to Anderson and Oxford, just I mean, it's a perfect time for me. So, good to be here.
Yeah, very good. Glad to have you on. And there's lots going on in college football. I want to start, though, with Tennessee, number 1 in the college football playoff rankings. Were you good with that? Do you like the Vols being on top?
Yeah, I don't think that they're going to stay there necessarily. I think they are the best team in terms of resume, and they've earned it. They've gone and played the most teams. They've gone played the most ranked opponents. They've looked the most convincing. They have one of the biggest wins. Maybe not the most impressive win of the year, but they have one of the best wins of the year with the win over Alabama. So I think I think they definitely deserved it, and this team is kind of they have a lot of things in place that would put them at number 1. Now I don't know if it stays there to the end of the year because it's the first ranking system, but I had no problem with them being up there for the first one.
The first college football opening in the SEC is now the Auburn Tigers with the news of Brian Harsin. Number 1, what was your take on that whole situation? And as you now fast forward it, what do you think about the Auburn Tigers as they now are on the search for a head coach?
Yeah, that was a very weird situation that played out very, very publicly. I think anybody in your state, in Alabama, and anybody familiar with how the things are run at Auburn, wasn't probably too surprised that the good old boys and some of those boosters had a lot to say about the hiring process of that. I was very confused as to why they allowed it to play out so long and so publicly, because he should have been gone. He could have made a case very, very early on in this offseason or in this season. They didn't do that. But moving forward, I think it's a top 15 program in the country. They will have their pick of people for that short list. Now, if those people go there or not, I don't know, because that's a pretty toxic situation. But you look at some of the head coaches they're looking at. Some of them love toxic situations, and so we'll see how it plays out.
Do you see Lane Kiffin taking the job at Auburn?
Okay, so I don't. I don't. I think that Auburn fans have kind of been convinced that he is the guy. I don't think that happens, just because if I'm Lane, I've had my entire coaching career play out in real time and in almost in a laughable situation at times from some of the situations that you got yourself in. I think that we talk about the tarmac, we talk about what happened at Tennessee, and I think he's grown a lot from that. I don't think that's who he is anymore as a coach, but he's got some stability for the first time in his coaching career. It feels like where they're 8-1 right now, and they're almost flying under the radar, right? So I don't know if he would chance that or risk that by going to Auburn and putting himself in a situation that, let's be honest, guys, Chiswick won a national championship in year 2. He was gone 2 years later. So, and he probably deserved to be. But the bottom line, he was gone 2 years later. So this is a program that is a very, what have you done for me lately type of mentality, and I don't know if he wants to be in that. I think he's looking for something more long term.
Yeah, no doubt. Alabama LSU is this coming weekend, and weirdly enough, because of the hype around Tennessee, Georgia, this is almost playing second fiddle in a way that it doesn't really in every other college football season. Where do you think this Alabama football team is as they go back on the road this week to LSU? We know their struggles so far on the road, but now going back to the vaunted Death Valley at night.
Bama's lost 5 games in Death Valley since 1958. They've lost 5 total games there since 1958. Historically, you got that on your side. I think that Bama is a very good football team. I'm hoping this 5 weeks did them some good as well. But I don't like it. I don't like it. As somebody that grew up, being in an Alabama home, I still don't like it. I don't feel like this team is necessarily mentally tough enough to go to Baton Rouge and win there. I hope they are, but I don't trust them. We saw it happen in Texas. We saw it happen for a minute in Arkansas. We saw that game in Arkansas. People forget that Jalen Milroe was 1 of 4 for 3 yards in the second half. You got the win, but away from home, this team is a different animal. Now, I will say this: they're also being criticized for what happened at Tennessee thing. I I don't see us going up there and getting 17 penalties called on Alabama. I just don't see that happening again. So maybe they've cleaned that up a little bit. Maybe the league kind of understands kind of 17 penalties to 4 is a little bit of egregious. But we're not going to get started on that because I'll get heated up.
We're talking with Chris Marler, Saturday Down South, and the College Football Uncensored podcast. What would you pinpoint as the issues for Alabama on the road? I mean, we saw close games in Texas. You mentioned Arkansas. They're back on the road in LSU. What would you say are kind of these issues? You think it's just mental thing for Alabama on the road?
I think it's focus, and I think it's a put your foot on someone's throat and know when to not let up. And I don't think Alabama does a really good job of that this year, where they don't have that killer instinct. I think for whatever reason, they've got the guys. Alabama's got the dudes, but at any point, and this is not just a player thing. This is to the coaching staff. This is the Saban. But there's at any point in that game against Tennessee, you had every opportunity to win, despite having 17 penalties and despite having turnovers and whatever the hell happened on that muff punt. Like you had every opportunity to win, and you didn't do it. And you missed that field goal at the end. And you're like, all right, well, I guess we'll go to overtime as long as they don't give up 43 yards in 2 plays. They just routinely don't have the mental edge where they should put your foot on someone's throat and don't let up. I tell you what, it's what Kirby's teams do now that you don't see from Saban's as much. It's like you go into someone else's home and just take their will, right? And Bama used to do that a lot. They don't do that as much anymore.
No doubt. Your thought about Kirby versus Nick kind of tees up my next question. How do you see the matchup between what Georgia will do defensively and then what Tennessee not only has done offensively but did against Alabama in that game? What do you see the adjustments being made, and how do you see that matchup specifically Tennessee's against Georgia's D playing out?
I mean, so I think this is kind of my favorite question all week because everyone just kind of assumes Georgia's defense is going to be the difference maker, right? And maybe they will be because I think one thing is like you look at Georgia, they've given up 30 points or more just 10 times during Kirby Smart's tenure there. I don't know if that happens this weekend, but I do think that the key to this game is way more to do with Georgia's offense versus Tennessee's offense than it is Georgia's defense versus Tennessee's offense because Tennessee's offense is going to put up points. They are going to, confuse you, give you some weird looks. And they're going to spread you out as much as possible. And they've got a lot of talent. They've got a lot of talent on that team. But Georgia's offense is, from a numbers standpoint, outside of the 49 points a game, they're just as good. They're just as explosive in a lot of ways that Tennessee is as well. I think that people are sleeping on Todd Monken's offense and Stetson Bennett and all that. And I think that they're going to go out there and probably put up as many points as they want to against Tennessee defense that's been, a little bit lackluster this year.
College football conversation happening here with Chris Marler of the College Football Uncensored podcast, as well as Saturday Down South. Chris, I want to get your thoughts on one more SEC team, and that is Texas A&M. What in the world is happening out in College Station?
oh man. That has been fun to watch. I don't know, but I think it's a lesson for all of us that if you show up and you spend the entire off season talking crap to everybody and pointing the finger and telling everybody what you're going to do in terms of like success and how it's us against the world. Well, now you find yourself in a situation that you absolutely deserve to be in, and it's hilarious to watch. Because those fans don't deserve that. Those players probably don't even deserve that, but Jimbo Fisher absolutely deserves everything that he's been getting as a head coach because he's the one that put him there. And I tell you what, at some point, he's got to put away that Cheesecake Factory long play sheet that he's carrying around with like 47 pages in it, and then just say, you know what, like somebody else can call these plays because if there's one thing I know about Jimbo, what he's best at is blaming someone else. And I can't even imagine that he hasn't done that yet. So that's what if I'm Jimbo, just do what you always do, man. That is point the finger at somebody else, point the blame at somebody else, and move on.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. About LSU specifically, going back to the Alabama LSU matchup, but specifically about LSU, these last couple of games they've been pretty outstanding. What do you make of Brian Kelly in his first year there, and then some of the things that you're looking forward to Saturday in that meeting with Alabama?
Having a mobile quarterback is something that Saban's defense have struggled with before. So I looked at that. Peyton Jim's 11 touchdowns in the last 2 games combined. How does Bama stop that? I think you got to have more than just one person get involved. I think this is a game where Keishawn Booty's got to get involved, and you got to have somebody else involved as well. Just because I think that he's really good, but also it's going to take more than just him, and he hasn't really shown up that much this year to beat Alabama. So I think having two, you have to have a little more dynamic on offense for him for them to beat Bama, but also I think Brian Kelly's done a great job. I mean, we're talking about a loss at home to the number 1 team in the country where you fumbled the opening kickoff, and then a 1-point loss on a missed extra point. Those are your only 2 losses this year. He's done a phenomenal job, and to be in November and have a chance to win the SEC West this week. I don't know if anybody thought that was going to happen after week 1, and I think it's great to watch. It's great to see, and I think that's a program that has needed some more stability and needed somebody to come in there and put together a process, an organizational process of this is how we do things, and we're going to present ourselves in a more professional way. Anytime you don't have your side piece of kids running drills in practice for fun, I think that's probably a step up from where you want to be.
Chris Marlar, Saturday Down South, also with the College Football Uncensored podcast, talking college football with us this afternoon. Chris, really appreciate you coming on with us. Enjoyed chatting with you. We'll have to do it again real soon.
Sounds good, guys. Y'all have a good one.
Thank you, buddy.
Chris Marlar with Saturday Down South and College Football Uncensored podcast joining us here on WKXX Live.
Yeah, he's also a great Twitter follow. If you don't if you have Twitter and you just want to be entertained by college football topics, he's at and his handle alone should be a reason to follow him. His Vern Funquist, Funquist. So, but yeah, he's sensational. I think he brought up a lot of really solid points there. Kind of pump the brakes on the Georgia defense right now. And some of the things that he mentioned about Texas A&M, I think a lot of people lose sight of the fact that Jimbo, ran that trap a little bit earlier in the season, and he's kind of getting that comeuppance, so to speak. And Chris, I think eloquated that really nicely.
He did. And one thing that stood out to me of what Chris said about Lane Kiffin, and something that I haven't thought about, is Lane has stability for the first time.
True. Yeah.
And His time at Tennessee did not end well. Obviously, his time in the NFL did not end well. He got fired on the tarmac in Southern Cal. He finally has some stability as a head coach at a prominent program.
That last phrase is I think the perfect one, because the FAU bounced into the Ole Miss job. And I think if he hadn't had that FAU, and that was semi-stability on a lower level, but now he's got that stability at a Power 5, has a chance to win a division, one of the hardest divisions in college football. He now has that stability. He's had it at one spot, then took it to the next. And so the fact that he's able to do that and have it for the first time probably as a head coach, because he probably got the job way too early in life, and he's learned those lessons. Yeah, I agree with it. And I think that's actually a really... It's actually a really good point that I think that even he, whether it's a conscious thought or maybe a subconscious thought, now realizes as he matures, and we've just heard him mature over the course, maybe since the time he was Alabama's offensive coordinator, kind of hearing that maturity come out of him.
Yeah, for sure. But appreciate Chris Marlar. If you missed any of that, we'll put it up on our WKXX Live podcast channel for you to listen to. We'll grab a break, though. I want to talk some college basketball on the other side. Auburn had their exhibition last night. We'll talk about that on the other side.
This week at Premier Cinema 16, need one more scare.
We are back on this Thursday, the WKXX Live, Fox Sports 102.9. Jason Gerhard here with you as appreciate our guest in the last segment, Chris Marler. We'll have Brad Law of the Auburn Sports Network will join us at 3. We got a lot of guests coming up in hour 2. Brad Law at 3. Wilson Alexander, LSU beat writer. We'll get a really good insight on the LSU Tigers as they get ready to face Alabama coming up at 3:15, and then Elliot Galt coming up at 3:30. But I want to hit on some college basketball. It's that time of the year, and you got exhibitions happening. Jacksonville State playing tonight in an exhibition against Auburn Montgomery. But Auburn hit the court last night, and they got a good win over the University of Alabama at Huntsville, UAH. 87-69 was the final there for Auburn. And this is a different Auburn team. You lost Jabari Smith. You lost Walker Kessler, and, 2 guys to the NBA draft. And so you had, 2 dynamic players. You got some guys back, but you lost 2 dynamic players that you're now having to use other guys and multiple guys to replace those 2 guys.
Yeah, most certainly. And I think that, for the questions for Auburn, not necessarily, who's got to replace them in game 1. It's like who can, over the course of these next few months, step up into those roles. And I think that Coach Bruce Pearl will just let it play out on the court. I think that they gained a lot of knowledge of, when they went overseas to Israel and played those games there. I think they played 3 games there, won 2 and lost 1 to the national team. And they were able to gain some clarity there and then pick it up a little bit more, as they go into the regular season this year. And so I think there's guys that he's kind of shaped in his head as players that can do it. And now it's like, hey, who can go do it on the floor and then find the identity of the squad?
Yeah, and that's important for this time of the year. Bruce Pearl did have a chance to speak to the media following that win last night.
Yeah, he talked a little bit about just some of the guys that he saw, some of what he thought coming out of it. The leading scorer in that game was Jalen Williams, who had 16 points. But you also had Alan Flanagan, who was back in the game or back, in the season after, dealing with some injuries. 11 points, 6 rebounds for him. He touched on those guys and just some of the things that he gleaned right afterwards, not watching the tape, but right after the game yesterday.
It's a great preparation for us because they run, really good stuff. It's hard to guard. They got shooters. We obviously played them one-on-one. Didn't give a lot of help and made those guys kind of score over us. I thought our first half defense was really good. Obviously, Jalen Williams was terrific. Had great pop, great energy, making plays, bouncy. Looked great. It was great. Al getting back and seeing Al healthy now, seeing his athleticism, and him making plays. And, that was really, really good. So obviously our strength, is our depth. We got to make more shots. We got to make more open shots. And so if our shooting percentages could have increased, we would have looked a lot better. Turn them over 25 times was good. I thought we could have done a better job of taking care of the ball ourselves.
That was Bruce Pearl there following their win last night in their exhibition game against UAH. But one thing that Bruce Pearl has, I feel like year in and year out, is depth. And he has that once again. The guy's incredible at recruiting, first of all, but being able to put together depth and the quality of depth, I think, is important in what he has.
Yeah, and he's getting a lot of these guys that were superstars in their high school, maybe really stars for their AAU team, and he's able to gel them and to play a team concept and play team basketball, which I think is another wrinkle to the depth, because in basketball, a lot of times, one player can make such a huge difference that it's sometimes hard to fold those guys into the team mentality, but he's able to do that. They can go 10 deep. And I know an exhibition game is not the best, thing to look at as far as the box score, though, because you get a lot of players who play a lot of different minutes. But Auburn any night can go 7, 8, 9, 10 deep. And that's going to be really, really, really tough for them, for opponents, because, college basketball season is so weird. He talked about Flanagan. He was hurt last year for parts of the year. You just need guys to be able to step up. And teams that are 6 deep or 7 deep, they don't have that, because as soon as one guy gets hurt, then you take a guy who hasn't been playing all year, then you throw him into the mix. It's really difficult. So the fact that Bruce Pearl is able to keep the guys happy with their minutes, with their production, and then be able to put out the best unit on the floor, I think is really sensational. He talks about keeping, holding on to the ball. 18 turnovers yesterday, 6 of 27 from 3. That's 22%. They have to get better at both of those.
Yeah.
I expect them to do so, but you're right about the depth.
Yeah, for sure. And again, Jacksonville State exhibition tonight against Auburn Montgomery. They will begin the season against Shorter coming up on Monday night. And once again, we will be your home for Jacksonville State men's basketball beginning on Monday night. We'll grab a break here. Brad Law joins us. We'll talk some Auburn football and some more Auburn basketball with Brad coming up on the other side to start hour number 2 of WKXX Live.
The press Fox Sports. WKXX is live for the fastest 2 hours in sports talk radio. Get ready for Chase Robinson
He has got to be a player they can rely on in big situations.
and Gerhard Mathangani
Has the trust of his team. Sounds like the makeup of his team is in a really good space, and I believe that's because of the culture he's curated down there.
for WKXX Live. These guys have you covered from preps to pros and everything in between. Now, let's go inside the Fox Sports 102.9 studio with Chase and Gerhard for WKXX Live.
Hour number 2 on this Thursday afternoon at WKXX Live. Chase Robinson, Gerhard Mathangani here with you. Glad you're along with us. We've got a busy hour coming up as at 3:15 we'll be talking with Wilson Alexander. He is a beat writer for the LSU Tigers. We'll get some insight on that LSU team heading into the game with Alabama this week. We'll have Elliot Galt with our weekly Weiss Lake Fishing Report coming up at 3:30. But right now, we are joined by Brad Law of the Auburn Sports Network. We'll talk some Auburn football and some Auburn basketball with Brad. Brad, as always, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on with us.
Hey guys, happy to do it. Lots going on. It's a really interesting time right now, and we are always glad to come on and talk about it.
Yeah, it's been a interesting week to say the least. I know down in Auburn, Carnell Williams, now the interim coach, a guy from right here in Etowah County, where we sit, played at Etowah High School. It's great to see him be able to have a chance to lead this program for the next few weeks. Talk about what you've seen from Carnell Williams in your time at Auburn, and your time seeing him there on staff, and what he's going to bring to this football team the next few weeks.
Carnell Williams is one of the top 3, probably top 2 running backs in Auburn football history. And he doesn't carry himself like he's one of the top 2 or 3 running backs in Auburn football history. And I'm talking about in terms of his attitude, the way he treats other people. He is a hard worker. He is a passionate guy. He understands Auburn and loves Auburn and the people, and understands that loving Auburn means appreciating the people that make Auburn what it is. And all that sounds really flowery and romantic, and I can kind of, if you're not an Auburn person, you may roll your eyes at it, and that's okay, because that's what Carnell embodies. And we've seen that as a player. He's a guy who really doesn't think about the next thing or the next step. The way he ran the ball, like that carry could be his last carry. It's that same type of passion and fire with which he does everything. And that's what's helped him ascend into the coaching profession. It's what made him the choice as the interim head coach when that became necessary early this week. So, he is the same guy who thrilled those fans at Jim Glover Field in Attala for Coach Raymond Farmer some 20-plus years ago, I guess now 23 years ago for Etowah. Same guy who made those Auburn fans stand and cheer at Jordan-Hare Stadium and beyond at Auburn and in the NFL, and now in this role. He's the same guy, same approach.
Exactly. That's the thing that was very, very well put. In addition to Carnell and expanding on the coaching staff, all of the headlines go to Brian Harsin being fired, but a lot of other guys went with him. What do you make of the revamped coaching staff, and then how do you expect this team to prepare from a game plan perspective as they go to Starkville this weekend?
That's a really great question, and I would say it this way. I don't have an expectation. I have a curiosity. I'm curious to see how it unfolds because the offensive coordinator is out. The tight ends coach is out. The wide receivers coach and offensive line coach are now co-coordinators, and then you have support staffers or, guys who are those analysts and GAs moving up into higher roles. What does that mean? I don't know. I know Will Friend has coordinated an offense before at Colorado State when he was there. Mike Bobo was the head coach. He's got some experience there. Obviously, Ike Hilliard is respected as an offensive mind, and he's able to really lock in and focus on the task at hand. I don't think after 8 games you can change, that you can completely revamp an offense. So if I have any expectation, it's that things would be similar. Like, it just makes sense to me that things would be similar because it's the language, it's the offense, it's the scheme that the guys have learned and that they know best. And that probably gives them the best chance to execute most consistently. But I'm not sure of that, and I'll be curious to see, just like everybody else on Saturday, what that looks like.
We're talking with Brad Law of the Auburn Sports Network. On the road this week in Starkville, taking on Mississippi State, a team it's got a good quarterback in Will Rogers. They've had some really bright moments this year. They've had some, other moments where, they haven't looked like the same team. What do you make of Mississippi State, and what do you think the challenges are this week for the Auburn Tigers?
Well, this game is interesting because, it's a game, and it's the first game after a coaching change, and there's that element. You also have a lot of players on this defense who remember last year's game. And it wasn't the first loss in the losing streak, but it sure does seem like the turning point last season when Auburn led 28-3 late in the second quarter, and Will Rogers made a slight adjustment. Now, I'm never going to win any awards for being the most knowledgeable football person, but watching the game last year from the press box, Auburn was aggressive defensively. They were all over the Mississippi State wide receivers, and Will Rogers added just a little shoulder flinch, a little, not even a full pump fake, but almost just an upper body quick rotation that drew defenders out of lanes and opened things up for the receivers. Does Mississippi State try to do the same thing? Do they use their same strategy? What does Auburn do defensively? Jeff Schmedding is still coordinating this defense. He was the linebackers coach a year ago. He was a part of formulating the game plan. What lessons can be learned from last year when over the last 35 minutes of that ball game, Mississippi State dominated the Auburn defense? Got to make adjustments, got to make changes, because especially at home, they've been nearly unstoppable offensively.
No doubt. Brad, obviously everybody sees the games on Saturdays. They don't really see practice, or they don't see the ins and outs of recruiting. How do you figure this coaching staff, this interim coaching staff, and these guys that are going to be in this position for, maybe a little over a month, and if they go to a bowl, a little bit more than that, what do you see this team doing as far as being able to keep consistent, attacks on players from the recruiting side of things, at the same time try to keep this 22 Auburn team on the rail, so to speak?
I appreciate you asking that question, because I think it goes back to Carnell. And one of the things that sold Carnell for the spot as running backs coach 3 years ago, and it's interesting, let me kind of pull the curtain back a little bit. We interviewed Carnell for Tiger Talk, which we'll have tonight on our network. We did that earlier today, and he goes through the story of his conversation with Gus Malzahn. And Gus told him, this is 3 years ago when the running backs coach job was open. Gus told him, I've got more qualified candidates, but everybody's telling me I've got to talk to you because you get Auburn. And one of the things that sold Gus on Carnell was Carnell's passion for talking about recruiting. And he said, I can relate to guys. I know how important recruiting is. I can get the guys here that you need. I can win in the living room, so to speak. And, with Carnell as the interim head coach, I think that unifies the recruiting effort. I mean, there are stories out there just in the last 48 hours of, class of 24 guys who are getting offers from Auburn. So that machine doesn't stop. If anything, I think it ramps up, because Carnell understands, as well as anybody can, the need to bring top talent in if you want to compete and have a sustainable, stable, consistent program at Auburn. Not a place like Auburn, but Auburn specifically.
Yeah, very good points there. We're talking with Brad Law, the Auburn Sports Network. A lot going on in football, but I do want to hit on basketball with you, Brad, because Auburn did have an exhibition last night. They got a win over UAH. The season starts next week. What did you see from this Auburn basketball team last night? What stood out to you?
Well, Trey Donaldson. I didn't expect Trey to have the kind of game that he had. He was, he's a freshman. May look at some time at the point guard, maybe 3-guard spot, but he was 4 of 6 from the field. He had 10 points, 7 rebounds, a couple of assists, a steal in the game. and that was in how many minutes did he play? He played 17 minutes. So I thought that was impressive. Jalen Williams didn't miss a shot. He was 6 of 6 from the floor, 3 of 3 at the free throw line, game high 16 points. He had 4 rebounds and a couple of assists in the game. He's just steady. I don't know how much you can take out of an exhibition game, because the year Auburn went to the Final Four, it lost its exhibition game. So I don't know. I know that I like the veteran leadership on this team. I know that Auburn has to shoot better than 6 of 27 from three-point range, which it did last night. Missed all 11 of its three-point attempts in the second half. So that's a teaching point. That'll be something they'll have to play better. You can beat George Mason going 6 of 27 from 3, but you probably can't win more than half your games in the SEC doing that. So those are some of the highs and the lows from, whatever you can take out of exhibition games.
Yeah, no doubt. And kind of a caveat to that, as you wave your or shake your proverbial 8-ball, who do you see stepping up as like the leader of this basketball team? Over the course of last year, we knew Jabari Smith was talented, and then Walker Kessler really came on a little bit later on as the defensive guy, then became the best defensive player in the country. How do you see this team maturing, not just necessarily based on last night's game in isolation, but maybe what you've seen through their Israel trip and then through preseason practice? And where do you forecast this team, and maybe who might be the 2-3 guys that people need to look out for that will be household names in January?
Yeah, I love that question. I think that Jalen Williams has to be one of those guys. He's not a loud guy. He's not boisterous. He's not KD Johnson with his emotions on the floor. He's not Dylan Cardwell with his emotions on the floor, but he's steady. He's going to be where he's supposed to be. He's in the right place on the floor all the time. I think he can be a big part of that. Alan Flanagan being back at 100%, son of a coach. I think he's one of those guys on the floor. And then Zep Jasper, who used the COVID year to come back for his 5th season of college basketball. He's another one of those guys. Now, none of those 3 are loud, emotional players, but they're steady. They're consistent. And I think in particular, Alan Flanagan's consistency, his ability to lead by example is going to be awfully important for this team this year. I think there are a lot of potential leaders. Babatunde Akingbola is a name you're never going to hear throughout. Well, rarely will you hear his name throughout the season, but he has stuck around and lasted because he is the biggest supporter of the rest of his team from that bench. He's the best guy in that department that you could find anywhere. So I think everybody carries a little glue with them to help lead and push this team forward.
Well, it should be interesting to see how basketball gets started next week. Football at Mississippi State this Saturday. Busy time down in Auburn. Appreciate you, Brad, for taking a few minutes and talking with us this afternoon.
You bet, guys. Hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and War Eagle to the Auburn fans up in Northeast Alabama.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you, Brad.
Brad Law of the Auburn Sports Network here on WKXX Live. We got to jump to a break because we're going to talk some LSU football on the other side, getting ready to take on Alabama. Wilson Alexander from the Advocate of Baton Rouge joins us next. football now. And we're going to talk things from the LSU side. We're going to talk with LSU beat writer for The Advocate. That is Wilson Alexander. He joins us now. Wilson, I really appreciate you coming on with us.
Thanks for having me, Chase. How y'all doing today?
Doing well. And getting ready for a big weekend of college football, and that includes Alabama going down to Baton Rouge to take on the LSU Tigers. And, I feel like this game has obviously garnered a lot of attention, one, because LSU has just continued to progress week in and week out. What have you seen really from the start of the season until now? How have you seen kind of this LSU team evolve under Brian Kelly in his first year?
This team has steadily improved pretty much week to week, with the exception of the loss to Tennessee, which, of course, in retrospect, Tennessee is one of the best teams in the country this year. And it's a little bit more understandable that they lost, not necessarily in the way that they did, but they didn't win that game. But even then, they were really sloppy in the opener against Florida State. You could tell it was a team that had new coordinators and pretty much an entirely new coaching staff and a lot of new players, and that those things weren't really coming together yet. But they had some gritty wins, really just off a fight at the beginning of the season against Mississippi State and at Auburn. A game that was still in through for 85 yards, but they were still managed to come back and win. And then now the last 2 weeks, they've really the last 2 games, I should say, they really put things together on the offensive side. It's been a pretty good defense, but now they're playing really well on both sides. Jaden Daniels has stepped up his game in a big way over the last 2 weeks and made them a team that you kind of have to watch for now.
No doubt about it. Wilson, Gerhard here. One of the things that I find the most impressive about what this team has done in the last couple of weeks has been their production in the second half, which usually always kind of as a football, just nomenclature, you just say that it's coaching. What specifically are you maybe attributing to what Brian Kelly and his coaching staff is doing in these second halves to play as well as they've played?
They're well conditioned, which is maybe sort of overlooked, but certainly important. That's Brian Kelly attributed the wins to Mississippi State and Auburn to that, simply that they were more well conditioned and be able to pull away in the second half. Those were games that LSU trailed both of them by double digits in the first half, and then absolutely shut down from there. And then went on a 31-3 run against Mississippi State, and then went on a 21-0 run against Auburn. And then they've also made some really good defensive adjustments in a lot of these games. I think against Mississippi State, they had a really good plan to stop that air raid. They did some good things defensively to adjust once Auburn came out in a look that they weren't expecting. And then same thing against Ole Miss. Ole Miss went up 17-3 and then only scored 3 points from there. LSU was on a 42-3 run after that. A lot of it was because they started bringing pressure to Jackson Dart, forcing him to make plays because they were able to stop the run on early downs and really pull away in that game. And then they were able to pull away so big, which they hadn't been able to do earlier in the season because of Jaden Daniels in the offense.
Jaden Daniels, just a spectacular quarterback for LSU, really in all of the SEC. Talk about his development and just how you've seen him kind of lead this LSU team.
At this first maybe month and a half of the season, really through the Auburn game, he was kind of a run-first quarterback. He was doing some decent things through the air in terms of his completion percentage was pretty good overall, although in the 2 SEC games with Mississippi State and Auburn, it was kind of low. And then against Auburn in particular, he only threw for 80 yards. And he wasn't really being assertive and aggressive downfield in the passing game. He wasn't throwing with anticipation, and it was holding the offense back from what it could ultimately be. At the same time, he was keeping things afloat with his rushing ability, which really is special and unique because of how fast he can be. It doesn't even look like he's running that fast, but he just glides. But now, LSU really sort of coached him up to be assertive downfield, and it clicked. It started to kind of show up a little bit against Tennessee, even though it was hard to see at times in that game. And then a switch sort of flipped before going into Florida. And a lot of it just has to do with having more time with his receivers and having more time in an offense. It wasn't like they had some players-only meetings where they talk a lot about trust, and those seem to have certainly helped. But really it's just sort of having time together to get on the same page and build that chemistry that can be so important and crucial. It just sort of, over time, it all of a sudden just kind of happened once they had enough time together.
For sure. Another interesting caveat to this game is Eli Ricks, the former LSU star. We see a lot of disgruntled players maybe not getting a lot of time at one school, transferring to another. But Ricks wasn't that situation because he played a lot, coming right out of high school, actually, and going to Baton Rouge. I know everybody else will downplay it, but from your perspective, how important do you think this game is for him personally, and then maybe even from the other side, from the LSU side as well, to be able to get back at their old teammate?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if there's any sort of chirping or extra things like that. LSU played Auburn earlier this year, and they had a receiver who had played at LSU, Coy Moore. A clip came out of Coy Moore saying he had been the best receiver at LSU, and LSU certainly seemed to take offense to that. You haven't heard anything like that out of Eli. So it's kind of interesting to see if pregame, if there's any sort of discussion between him and some of LSU's players, because transfers are so common in college football these days that, I think everybody sort of understands it. But his situation was a little bit peculiar because last year, his mom said right after he sort of shut things down and went ahead and got surgery on a labrum injury that he wasn't transferring at all. And that it wasn't because he was preparing to go into the portal, and then sure enough he did and went to LSU's arch rival. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm not quite sure what to expect from that.
We're talking with Wilson Alexander of The Advocate, LSU beat writer, as LSU hosting Alabama this week. What have you seen from the crowds down in Baton Rouge? I mean, the Death Valley is known to be one of the most hostile environments in college football. It's a night game this week. How ready are the LSU fans for this game Saturday night?
I think they really are. They're all hoping that the rain that's projected to come through on Saturday gets out of the way earlier in the morning or earlier in the afternoon, so that it is clear. And they say the chance of rain is never in Tiger Stadium, but and they sometimes are able to embrace it. But obviously, everybody wants some nice weather. Because it's really the first big game that they've. I mean, Ole Miss was, a ranked opponent and all that, but LSU wasn't ranked at the time yet, and there was a afternoon kickoff. This is the first, charged night game in Tiger Stadium since the 2019 season, and they're really looking forward to it. I think a lot of them understand that LSU as a program is certainly not at Alabama's level yet, but they feel like they've got a little bit of hope and maybe a chance, and that a really just exciting sort of atmosphere and high stakes in November for the first time in about 2 years.
For sure. Wilson, I don't know your direct, maybe personal, maybe ins and outs conversations with Brian Kelly, but he's earned kind of a national narrative of a certain kind of coach, whether it's, there's a lot of people who put a lot of labels on it. And there was that, clip that came out a few weeks ago where he was, chastising reporters for being late and whatnot. What have been some of your impressions of Brian Kelly? Of course, it's a very vast departure from guys like Ed Orgeron and Les Miles and others. But do you sense that maybe the national narrative of him and what you've gotten to know of him so far in his regime down at Baton Rouge might not be aligned, or do you think that it's about the same?
Yeah, I don't think that those sort of national narratives and perception of him when he came to LSU and what we've actually seen so far are aligned. He's been easy to work with, certainly on our end. He's organized in a way that LSU hasn't seen really since Nick Saban was here about 20 years ago. Fans love just how sort of clearly he speaks, because they're not used to that. Having someone who just knows how to run an organization, they're not used to that. They've had some really high moments here because of the talent that LSU can actually bring in, but now they seem to have a coach who, time will tell exactly how his tenure goes, but at least somebody who knows how to run, sort of this high-speed car, and actually drive it properly instead of just sort of being in there and sort of seeing what happens. I mean, they like him, and they sort of, the jokes that he's much funnier than people have expected. And the thing with the reporter of being late, it really was kind of a joke on both sides. Right. It just did not land at all. And, he's a kind of a jokey person, so usually like a one-liner per press conference, and fans just seem to enjoy his sense of humor as well. As long as he wins, that's all they're going to care about, really. They'll embrace him if he's winning, and even if the national narratives around him don't change locally, they'll love him if he wins. That's really all that matters to them at the end of the day.
And he's done a good bit of that this year, and they'll face Alabama coming up this Saturday night. Wilson Alexander of The Advocate down in Baton Rouge. Wilson, appreciate your time today coming on with us, talking some LSU football. We'll have to get you on again soon, but appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, y'all. Have a good one.
Thank you.
You too.
Wilson Alexander there with The Advocate joining us here on WKXX Live.
I thought he was really good. I always like whenever new coaches go to new settings and the way that the local reporters think of him, because I even see it, in our time doing television together, we've been in a lot of press conference settings, and there's a lot of times whether it's local or national or even community based, you see sometimes the inner workings of somebody, and then the way that it might play out in the reputation, and if those two things aren't the same. So Wilson, obviously, and other reporters down there having a more of kind of a shotgun seat, so to speak, with the Brian Kelly experience. I thought it might be a little different. I'm glad he had a chance to voice it.
Yeah, for sure. So interesting stuff there from Wilson Alexander of The Advocate down in Baton Rouge. We'll have our weekly Westlake fishing report coming up. Elliot Galt will do that with us next.
The Press Box.
It is a Thursday afternoon here on WKXX Live. Chase and Gerhard here with you. As hopefully in a few minutes, we will be joined by Elliot Gaunt for our weekly Weiss Lake Fishing Report. But I want to go back to LSU for just a second. We talked with Wilson Alexander of The Advocate a moment ago. I didn't realize just the way things have fallen. This is the first big night game in Baton Rouge since 2019.
Yeah, and you know, obviously it was the 2020 season. You had the stadium capacities and whatnot, so you just haven't had that feel yet of a night game. Now, we thought at the time that the Tennessee game could be scheduled to be a night game, but the SEC obviously doing their schedule a couple weeks in advance, they didn't put that one. So obviously this one gets that night game slot. And so I thought it was really interesting that that number one has been that long. But then secondly, everybody remembers that 2019 team from LSU, and I think they want to recreate some of that magic that they had with Joe Burrow and Chase Daniel or Jamar Chase and all those guys that ended up making that run to the national championship.
Yeah, and so Alabama LSU this Saturday night in Baton Rouge, and I know Alabama fans. You heard Wilson say the LSU fans are hoping that the rain will get out of here Saturday morning, but I know the Alabama fans are hoping that it rains all night and keep the fans out of there. But we'll see what happens there. But should be a great game Saturday night down in Baton Rouge. Again, hopefully in just a second we'll be joined by Elliot Gaunt for our weekly Weiss Lake Fishing Report. But before that, and while we wait, I want to go back to something we did towards the beginning of the show as we were grading potential Auburn hires. And excuse me. And I want to continue that because we talked through Lane Kiffin, Deion Sanders, and Hugh Freeze, kind of the top targets. But there's a lot of other guys who I think could be potential candidates, or if they're not, they should be, in my humble opinion, up for this Auburn job. So again, as we were doing, 10 being the perfect fit, 1 being terrible fit at Auburn. Where do you see Matt Rule in this?
I think Matt Rule, to me, is a guy that is a solid fit, not perfect. I'm going to go with Matt Rule about a 7.5. Actually, I'll bump it down to a 7 even. The reason why is because, yes, he is a good coach, but he doesn't have roots in this conference. And I think that's a big part of it. And that's the reason that separates guys like Hugh Freeze and Lane Kiffin, because they've done it in this league. We've seen coaches that have done it in other leagues, whether it's even Power 5 leagues, that come to the SEC and they don't have the same amount of success. I don't know if Baylor and Temple's experiences help you in the SEC, but they do help you in college recruiting. And he's sent a lot of guys to the NFL from both those programs. So he will, I think, eventually be able to get it and get it done. But we've seen guys that have had modicum success there at other conferences and then come to the SEC and not have as much. Yeah,
I've got him as an 8. Just based off what he has done. I mean, like you were saying, it's hard though, to know with a guy like that coming from the NFL, how he can transition back.
Right.
But I think he could be good at Auburn. A name, and we talked about this yesterday, a name that hasn't been flying around is Luke Fickell at Cincinnati. Where would you rate him?
I think that Luke Fickell's his light was huge last year, and I think some of that is starting to die off just a little bit, and it's not such a bad way. But last year and the last couple of years, his team was able to get to a New Year's Six bowl and then to a college football playoff game. I think he's really, really good, but he's a situation to me that I don't necessarily see this being even as good of a fit as we talked about just a little bit earlier with Matt Rule. I will put Luke Fickell right at about a 6.9, 6.8, just under Luke Fickell, if not at a 7. His time there at Cincinnati, yes, has been solid. He had 11-win season back in 2018, 11-win season back in 2019, and then 9-win season in 2020, and then of course the 13-1 year last year, going to the semifinal of the college football playoff. 6-2 once again this year. I think I just need to see a little bit more for a little longer bit of time before I throw him into the gauntlet of the SEC.
I agree with you there. I put a 7 next to his name. I think he's a great coach, but yeah, he needs to be, I think, tested by the fire a little more before he got a job like Auburn. What about PJ Fleck, Minnesota?
I think on its surface, it seems fine. It's just I don't necessarily trust a lot of the guys that, like I said, haven't had the time in the SEC. Western Michigan, Minnesota. Those are his 2 stops as a head coach. He's got the row the boat, the Sky Raw, whatever. Like he's got all of the kind of coaching, things that you like, the energy things that you like. This league is a different beast. I'm gonna put him at about a 6.5, just because he hasn't been in this league, and this year it hasn't been all that great. I mean, team came in with high expectations, but they're 5-3 so far this year. I'd put him even below Luke Fickell.
I got him as a 6. I don't think that would be a good hire by Auburn. What about Chip Kelly out at UCLA?
A lot of Auburn fans won't agree with me on this one, but I actually have him at about a 7.5. I think that he to me is, if I'm just ranking him now based on my overall scale, a little bit ahead of Matt Rule, and then behind the top 3 candidates in Dion, Hugh Freeze, and Lane Kiffin being the 10. I think Chip Kelly has done a little bit to have a resurgence in the program there at UCLA. I really like what his offenses are able to do. I think that he bit off more than he can chew in the NFL. I think college football is his game. I still have some of the same concerns about him not coaching in the SEC, but his track record says that he could do it at a lot of different places. If he could do it at USC or UCLA in the shadow of USC, I expect some big things there. I'm a little higher on Chip Kelly than I think most.
Yeah, I don't see him. I've got him as a 6 because I really just don't see him getting it done. Mark Stoops in Kentucky. What would you say about him?
To me, he's about the same as Chip Kelly. To me, he's about a 7.5. That's where I put him as overall in this kind of coaching search, mainly because he's done it in the SEC, not to the degree of Lane and Hugh Freeze, but he had a really stable set of circumstances there at Kentucky. And I think if you could do it at a basketball school, and people want to argue that, then I think that he could still do it, whether it's a school that prioritizes football.
I've got him at an 8. I think that'd be a really good hire for Auburn. We'll get back to this in just a second here because we've got our weekly Weiss Lake fishing report. We join Elliot Galt now from Weiss Lake Tackling Outdoor. Elliot, how are you?
Doing good, Chase. How are you?
Doing well. So I know you've been on a hunting excursion. How's that been going?
Man, it was great. I killed my first bull elk, and a guy that was with me killed his first one the day after me, sitting in the same spot. So it was really good.
So I know you've been hunting, haven't been able to fish, but how has fishing been as of late?
Everybody back at home seems to be enjoying it a lot. The cooler weather seems to have the fish biting throughout the day. And of course, this normal fall pattern moving into the back of the creeks and the mouth of the creeks in the shallow water. So chasing a lot of bait fish. So they seem to be doing pretty good.
What are folks catching them on right now?
A lot of crankbait and top water. You can throw top water all day right now. Just catching them a lot on shad imitating baits, spinner bait, crankbait. Normal fall time stuff. Shallow divers up to about 6 footer. You can throw square bill to a DT6 and catch them pretty good.
And I know the water levels continue to go. What's the water level like right now up on Weiss Lake?
Yeah, it's low. It's I think it's reaching its 2.5, 3 foot point on the water. It should be reaching it pretty low. I would say probably 2.5 foot, maybe lower than that. Like I said, I haven't been there in around 2 weeks. I'm just going off what they told me. They had some tournaments back home here recently, and they did pretty good. So I would say 2.5, 3 foot, but we're only dropping at 3 foot this year, so it's going to be right there at its peak here soon, if it's not already.
How's everything at the store? What have been the hot items there?
Of course, we've been open while I've been gone, and just hearing from everybody, it's been the same stuff we've been catching them on, crankbait, spinnerbait, shad stuff. Not quite ready for the red stuff right now. It's the water temperature's not dropped that low. We've been throwing a lot of red chatterbaits, red crankbaits, but it's still shad imitating stuff. Any of the gray minnow / bait fish colors, and then when the water gets muddy, chartreuse blackback always works really good in the fall time when it comes to crankbaits.
We're talking with Elliot Galt of Weiss Lake Tackle and Outdoor. You can go by and see him right there off Cedar Bluff Road in Center. Visit him on Facebook, Weiss Lake Tackle and Outdoor. And I know you guys got some hunting stuff too, as hunting season's about to get going.
Oh, yeah, selling a lot of hunting feed. I got to go pick up a new order of feed Monday. We got deer draw, deer corn, molasses corn, and we have this stuff called Antler Boost, which is a high-protein deer feed, roasted soybeans, roasted peanuts, and corn, and it sells really, really good. I got another order supposed to come in this weekend. So, yeah, selling a lot of deer feed and a lot of fishing stuff.
So go by and see Weiss Lake Tackle and Outdoor. Again, they're in Center, right off Cedar Bluff Road. Very easy to find. And go by and tell them you heard the weekly Weiss Lake Fishing Report. Well, Elliot, appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you, Chase.
Thank you. Elliot Galt there of Weiss Lake Tackle and Outdoor, and joining a hunting trip in Colorado. I saw his pictures on Facebook of the elk he shot. Thought that was pretty cool there. I want to get through this list. We've tried all show to get through our coaching list, so we're going to take a break. We'll come back and finish that up next.
B-Dubs
WKXX Live continues here on this Thursday afternoon. Jason Gerhard here with you as we roll into our final segment on this Thursday. We've had some great guests today. Chris Marler joined us in hour number 1 of Saturday Down South. Great college football conversation with him. We talked with Brad Law of the Auburn Sports Network. We talked with Wilson Alexander of The Advocate, Baton Rouge, got some LSU thoughts. Elliot Galt joined us last segment. We've been trying all show to get through our rating our list of coaches. We have potential Auburn hires. It's it's one of those things where we just want it to last all show. I mean, we just spread it out.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. I think people in their own minds as they're running errands, going to and fro, they probably have a number in their head as well as we throw out these candidates, and so we'll see if it matches up.
Yeah, the last coach we mentioned was Mark Stoops. I gave him an 8. Because of what he's done at Kentucky. I thought he's done a great job of turning that program around. Auburn obviously needs somebody that can turn him around. I don't know if he's your long-term solution, but I think he's a guy that maybe can get the program back going in the right direction. Here's another name for you. Dave Aranda. He's the head coach at Baylor. What would you rate him?
I think that this is the first one that is probably south of that 6 level mark. I'll put him right at a 5. I think what he's done at Baylor has been solid, and it's another guy with ties to Baylor. Matt Rule also has ties to Baylor as well. I think Dan Veranda has done a pretty solid job. Won a conference championship, but it's one of those situations where I think the SEC still is a different beast, and with Aranda not having those close enough ties, to me, he's at a 5.
Yeah, and I've got him at a 6. Again, if you're just joining us, 10 is a perfect fit for Auburn. 1 is a terrible fit for Auburn. And I've got Dave Aranda at a 6. I think he's done a good job there at Baylor. Not the flashiest of names that Auburn would want, I think. But, I think he can win some games.
Yeah.
What about Jeff Grimes?
One quick note on Aranda. When I was talking about the SEC part of it, as a head coach, because keep in mind he was the coordinator at LSU, so he does have those ties to the SEC and ties to the South, but not as a head coach, and that's what I meant in that situation.
Yeah, good point there. Jeff Grimes.
This is the one where I think a lot of Auburn fans understand his ties specifically to Auburn because he was an assistant coach at Auburn, but he hasn't been a head coach, and that's the reason why I wanted to parse that with the Dave Aranda situation, because when I put Jeff Grimes here, I'm going to punish him, quote unquote, in this game, but punish him even more because he hasn't been a head coach at all. And so I'll put him at about 3 as a coaching candidate for the Auburn job. And people will ask, and that's the reason I wanted to separate the Dave Aranda and the Jeff Grimes situation, because it is a far enough distance enough for me, because Aranda has been a head coach at Baylor. Grimes hasn't. I'll put him at a 3, even though he does have specific ties to Auburn University.
Yeah, I'll put him at a 4. Also because he's never been a head coach. That would be a big step, going from Baylor's offensive coordinator to the head coach at what some would consider a prominent SEC school.
Right. And
this is realistic, though. A lot of folks at Auburn, your checkbooks at Auburn like Jeff Grimes.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk about the Jeff Grimes situation the last time Auburn was looking for a head coach. And Auburn didn't necessarily say that he wasn't a candidate, but all the talk out of Auburn was that Jeff Grimes was considered a possible candidate there. Now, everybody knows that he's got close ties to Auburn, was on Auburn's staff, the team that won the 2010 national championship. He was the offensive line coach on that team. He came in 2009, left in 2012. He's built some great offenses. I think a lot of people see that as well, and I think a lot of people might see the Gene Chizik-ish kind of tie, where it's a guy that we're familiar with. Gus Malzahn kind of is in that same fold, where Malzahn was the coordinator for a team that had successful runs, and maybe we can recapture that with another guy. But the thing is, Malzahn had head coaching experience at Arkansas State and others before taking that job. Jeff Grimes does not have that at all on the college level. And he has ties to Texas A&M, ties to Boise State, ties to Arizona State, and to Auburn, and to Virginia Tech, and to LSU, and now at Baylor. But the HC wearing that head coaching crown is a very different thing. And I don't know if you want to play guinea pig with Auburn University as him as the head coach.
Yeah. Another name, and again, this is just some notable names. Bill Clark obviously had to leave UAB on some health issues, had had back surgery. It's unknown yet if he'll return to coaching, but what would you rate him as a potential Auburn coach?
First of all, Coach Clark, you and I both know him pretty well. Number one, get healthy. And if he does get healthy and if he is, back to 100%, which I hope he can be because he's an asset to college football, he's the highest in my opinion, of the guys that are in this notables list.
Yeah.
For those that weren't with us for the other segments, I had Chip Kelly at about a 7.5, had Mark Stoops at about a 7.5. I'm going to put Bill Clark right above those two with his connections to the state of Alabama, his connections with all of the coaches here in the state. Recruiting will not be an issue for him as far as being able to at least get the ears of the guys that are coaching these players on the high school level.
Yeah.
His dad, a Hall of Fame head coach, Reagan Clark, the late great Reagan Clark, was a phenomenal high school coach. He was a great high school coach at Prattville. I'll put Bill Clark right at about a 7.7, kind of the leader among these teams, among these guys, because he's got specific ties to this state. Yeah, he has a coach on the Power 5 level, but we've seen it since his time at Jacksonville State. He is ready for a Power 5 job.
He is. I'd put him at a 7, but I think he would do well. I would love to see him, and you're right. He's done great. He did great at Jacksonville State. Those guys that went to that 2015 national championship were the guys he recruited.
Exactly.
He can recruit.
Yeah.
He's done great at UAB. I would love to see him have the keys to a big program.
I think he was on the way for that. Yeah. I think he was on the way to that. And it was just if the right one opened up. And I think they passed on him. There was, believe what you want to believe on the reports, but apparently I don't know how much mutual interest was there back in 2020. But what you saw, what he's done since then, it just lets you know that he's loyal. Number one, how loyal he was to UAB, staying with them through the dead period, and then coming back and rebuilding the program. And then next thing you know, just to even put a football team on the field is one thing. To go to a bowl is almost impossible. Yeah, and he was able to do that, be in contention for conference championships. I think he'd be dynamite. I think he'd be a home run. Same right there in that. This shows how high of praise I think that I have on him. He, to me, is right up there as far as a good candidate, right there with Mark Stoops and Chip Kelly, guys who have done it at the Power 5 level.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll see him get back into coaching.
100%.
College football needs him. I want to throw one more name. We got to get out of the show quickly, but I want to throw another name I've seen from AuburnDaily.com, Dan Lanning. What would you rate him?
Not necessarily there just yet. I'll put him at about 6.5 right now. He's had a nice turnaround with the Ducks, but not quite where the other guys are.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I don't know if he's ready to lead this program yet, even though he's done a good job out in Oregon. That is all the time we have for you. We got to get on out of here. It's flown by. Busy show. Check out the WKXX